Have you ever been asked to leave your very own seat just to make way for someone deemed more important? That moment cuts into human dignity like a knife. And for Marcus Ellington, it was not just humiliation. It was the spark that would shake an entire airline empire. Wednesday afternoon at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport, the sky was covered in a veil of silver gray. Passengers crowded, announcements blared without pause, and the rolling thud of luggage blended into a chaotic symphony. In the middle of the crowd, Marcus Ellington appeared, yet no one paid him any attention. The 52-year-old man wore a navy blue blazer over a simple gray t-shirt, dark jeans, and polished leather shoes. In his hands, only a neat carry-on suitcase and a glossy brown leather briefcase. No bodyguards, no assistants, no signs revealing he was the CEO of Ellington Systems, the tech conglomerate powering operational management systems for corporations around the globe, including the national carrier SkyWest Horizons. Marcus walked quietly, blending into the crowd, his amber eyes carrying 2 decades of storms in the business world, billion-dollar deals and handshakes that reshaped entire industries. He knew how to disappear, how to observe the world revealing its raw face. That day, all he wanted was peace. The flight back to San Diego was his chance to lean back, enjoy a glass of bourbon, and let his thoughts drift with the clouds. He had just closed a historic deal in Phoenix, securing a lucrative contract that solidified Ellington Systems' dominance in the market. On paper, this should have been a moment to celebrate, but sometimes peace is just a trap, and the most ordinary moments define destiny. When the call for first-class boarding came, Marcus rose. He handed his ticket to the agent and walked into the cabin. Seat 1A, his favorite, always offering stability in a restless life. He placed his briefcase under the seat, slid his phone into the front pocket, then leaned back, savoring the cool leather against his headrest. No one in the cabin noticed him, save for a few glances of recognition, as if he looked familiar, but unremarkable. Marcus was used to it, used to being underestimated until his business card hit the table. Everything seemed calm until a new figure appeared in the aisle. Brandon Hale, 29, tall, hair slicked back with shine, light blue shirt with sleeves rolled up, sunglasses perched arrogantly on his head. He carried himself like the world revolved around him. His eyes swept through first class as if taking inventory of his possessions. Marcus barely looked up. He reached for his documents, intending to skim through a few pages before takeoff. But then, the sharp click of heels stopped beside his seat. Sophie Clark, a petite flight attendant with a strained smile, leaned in. "Mr. Ellington," she began, polite yet tense. "We need you to change seats. This one has been reserved for a VIP passenger." Marcus lifted his gaze, cold and steady. "This is the seat on my ticket, 1A. I booked it 3 weeks ago." Sophie glanced toward Brandon, standing smugly near the galley, lips curved into a self-satisfied smirk. "Yes, but this guest is a premium member of our airline. If you would kindly move to 3C, we'd be most grateful." In that instant, the cabin seemed to hold its breath. A few passengers pretended to read their magazines, but their eyes flicked up, stealing glances. Marcus realized this was not simply about giving up a seat. This was a test of dignity. He spoke calmly, but firmly. Why should I give up my rightful seat just because he wants it? Sophie swallowed, her eyes betraying unease. Across the aisle, an older woman with silver hair, Linda Foster, 62, spoke up, her voice ringing clear. Why should he move? He's clearly in the correct seat. Brandon smirked, treating the situation as little more than amusement. For the first time, Marcus looked directly at him. His gaze did not burn with fury, but carried the resolve of a man too familiar with being dismissed. Memories surged. Dinners where he was mistaken for an assistant, meetings where his presence was ignored, until his signature on the contract changed everything. Marcus had learned to choose his battles, but some moments demand no retreat. And today, on this flight, in front of every witness, Marcus knew this was one of them. He exhaled slowly, gave a slight nod to himself, and said, I will not give up my seat. Not loud, not angry. Just a statement, but one strong enough to turn first class into a silent battlefield, every eye drawn to him. And that was only the beginning. Sophie turned away, but the small clatter of her heels echoed like thunder in Marcus's chest. He knew this was not over. People rarely surrender privilege, especially when they believe it belongs to them by default. Brandon Hale still stood there, his eyes sharp like a man awaiting his spoils of war. He tilted his head, smirked, and leisurely adjusted his cuff as though a crown was about to be placed on his head. His silence weighed heavier than 1,000 condescending words. Marcus sat still, back straight against the seat, hand resting on the armrest. His heart pounded, not from fear, but from the awareness that every second, every gaze fixed upon him was etching itself into a living social play. He had been in boardrooms where he was dismissed because of simple attire. He had been mistaken for a driver minutes before stepping on stage to sign multi-million-dollar deals. And now, history repeated itself. A sharp click broke the silence. The cabin door closed, signaling the imminent departure. Yet instead of calm, the air grew more tense. Glances flicked back and forth, whispers spread like an undercurrent. Then Sophie returned, but this time she was not alone. Beside her stood a tall, broad-shouldered man in a crisp uniform. Daniel Ross, the lead flight attendant. His face bore determination tinged with irritation, as if Marcus were nothing more than an obstacle to be cleared. Mr. Ellington, Daniel said, his voice deep and weighted with pressure. There has been a seating error. We need you to move to 3C to ensure the smooth operation of this flight. Marcus slowly raised his head. The operation of the airline, or the comfort of one passenger? The question cut like a blade through the fragile shell of procedure. Daniel faltered for a moment, then inclined his head toward Brandon. Brandon stepped forward immediately, his smile thin. Listen, my friend. I fly this airline every week. Seat 1A is practically mine. Don't take it personally. It's nothing against you. Marcus turned fully, facing him directly. Nothing personal? When you ask someone to give up the seat they paid for so you can have it? You think that's normal? A heavy silence dropped over the cabin. The drone of the engines outside seemed to fade, replaced by thick, pressing air. Then Linda Foster's voice rose from across the aisle. The older woman spoke firmly. Stop with the nonsense. He is in the right seat. Why are you trying to move him? Her words pierced the quiet like an arrow. A man in row 2 nodded in agreement. "The ticket decides the seat. End this now." Daniel frowned, unprepared for the passenger's reaction. Sophie's eyes flickered with unease, her hands clutching the clipboard so tightly her knuckles turned white. Marcus felt his heartbeat slow. For the first time, he was no longer alone. Daniel pressed harder, his tone edged with frustration as he tried to regain control. "If you refuse, we will have to delay this flight. That will inconvenience every passenger here." Marcus leaned back, his eyes steady, his voice resolute. "If a delay is the price of keeping my rightful seat, then let it be delayed." Sighs and mutters rippled through the cabin. Some passengers impatient, others watching Marcus with a quiet respect. In that narrow space, a battle for justice unfolded, carried on every glance and every breath. Brandon gripped the strap of his bag, his teeth clenched tight. The smug grin was gone. In its place, the face of a man stripped of his accustomed power. He pulled out his phone. As if were to wield it as another weapon, Daniel and Sophie retreated toward the galley, whispering urgently. Their figures disappeared from view, leaving Marcus seated, motionless, his eyes sharp as arrows piercing the void. He knew the fight was far from over. They would not surrender easily, not when pride and privilege were at stake. Moments later, the intercom crackled with the captain's voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, please settle into your seats. We will depart in a few minutes." Marcus listened in silence, but to him, the word "settle" rang like a warning bell. He knew stability was only an illusion. The real storm was still gathering. And deep down, Marcus understood. Today was not just a flight. It was a trial of dignity, and the outcome would echo far beyond the skies this plane was about to ascend into. The first-class cabin was wrapped in an eerie silence. Overhead lights glared white, their reflections gleaming on the cool leather seats. Marcus sat still, but inside him a storm brewed, waiting to break. He knew it was only a matter of time. And the moment came faster than he expected. Footsteps echoed sharply down the aisle. Sophie returned, but this time not only with Daniel. Walking beside them was a man in a dark uniform, a polished badge gleaming on his chest. Philip Warren, ground supervisor. His lips carried a smile, but it was cold, strained, the kind of smile used to deliver bad news. "Mr. Ellington," Philip began, his voice loud enough for the entire cabin. "We must ask you one final time. Please change your seat. This passenger is one of our elite members, and we need to prioritize accordingly." A wave of murmurs rippled through the cabin. Some passengers lifted their eyes from magazines, others pretended indifference, but all were listening. The matter was no longer private. It had been dragged into the open, staged before dozens of watchful eyes. Marcus closed the folder on his lap and placed it neatly onto the tray table. He lifted his gaze, calm but sharp as a blade. "I have already made it clear. This is the seat printed on my ticket. I will not move." The smile on Philip's face stiffened. He glanced at Brandon, who leaned near the galley wall with his phone in hand, eyes brimming with anticipation. Then Philip bent closer, his tone dropping through still loud enough for nearby rows to hear. "You realize that refusing crew instructions could result in your removal from this flight." The cabin jolted with tension. A chill swept through the air. It was no longer a request. It was a threat. Marcus felt his chest burn, not from fear, but from the sheer audacity. They wanted more than his seat. They wanted to paint him as the problem. A familiar tactic: shift blame onto the victim, force him to bow his head. Before Marcus could answer, Linda Foster, the silver-haired woman across the aisle, straightened in her seat, her voice ringing clear. "This is outrageous! You're threatening to remove a paying passenger just to cater to someone else's whim. This is not how a reliable airline operates." Murmurs of support rose. A man a few rows back added, "The ticket decides the seat, not membership level." Brandon shifted uncomfortably, forcing a strained smile. Clearly he had not expected the tide to turn. But Philip pressed on, sweat glistening faintly at his temple. "Please, everyone, stay calm. We are only trying to resolve this quickly, so the flight is not delayed." Marcus leaned forward, his voice deep and resonant, each word striking the air like iron. "What causes the delay is not me, it is this injustice." Silence followed. Tension thickened, stretched tight as if ready to snap. Philip pressed his lips together, realizing control was slipping through his fingers. The false smile vanished. After a brief hesitation, he straightened and gave a small nod. "Very well. You may remain in your seat. We will find another solution." Without another glance at Marcus, he turned away. Daniel and Sophie followed, their faces taut with strain. Marcus leaned back in his seat, but comfort did not return. He could feel the weight of dozens of stares, some supportive, some curious, some impatient with the delay. His heart still pounded. He had won a round, but he knew the battle was far from over. Outside the window, the sunset bled orange fire across the sky. But inside the cabin, the air burned hotter still. And Marcus had no doubt. What happened here today would not end with this flight. It would ripple far wider, reaching places Skywest horizons could never imagine. The cabin door sealed shut. The engines roared to life, and the aircraft rolled toward the runway. Outside, the sunset painted the clouds in crimson hues, breathtaking in its beauty. But inside the first-class cabin, no one had the mind to admire it. Marcus sat still in seat 1A, his eyes fixed on the window. Instead of the evening sky, he saw only his own reflection, eyes steady and unwavering, yet carrying a glimmer of exhaustion deep within. Yes, he had kept his seat, but the taste of victory felt hollow, because in truth, this was never about a chair. It was a public humiliation, a message that he was worth less than someone else. Brandon sat a few rows back, but his gaze lingered like a blade at Marcus's back. His phone remained in his hand, the screen flickering on and off, a weapon yet to be used. The smug smile had faded, replaced by a simmering irritation. From across the aisle, Linda Foster leaned slightly and gave Marcus a warm, affirming nod. It was not words, but a confirmation. He had done the right thing. Marcus returned the nod, though his shoulders stayed tense. The plane lifted off, the fuselage trembling in the engine's roar. When the seatbelt sign went dark, the crew began to move. Sophie avoided his eyes, clutching a tray of drinks, walking quickly as if to vanish into the pale light of the cabin. Daniel pretended to stay busy, yet his sharp glances carried the message clear as day. This battle was far from over. Marcus opened his leather case and pulled out a file, but the words blurred and danced meaninglessly. In his mind, the moments replayed relentlessly. Sophie's forced politeness, Philip's cold smile, the blatant threat that he would be removed from the flight. And above all, Brandon's gaze, the gaze of a man who believed priority was his birthright. Marcus had long grown used to being underestimated. But unlike before, this incident had not taken place behind closed doors. It had unfolded in full view of the cabin. They had not just wanted his seat. They had wanted to paint him as the problem, the disruptor. And that humiliation, Marcus knew, would not vanish when the plane touched down. He drew a deep breath, fingers gripping the armrest. No, this time was different. He remembered the years of building from nothing, when people called him the dreamer engineer, when banks refused his loans because the Ellington name carried no weight. He remembered the sleepless nights, the lines of code typed in a rented office, the trembling hands signing his first contracts. He had risen from rejection before, and now he sat in seat 1A, not merely by ticket, but by a lifetime of struggle. A chime rang as the service cart rolled past. Some passengers accepted champagne, their smiles tight, forced. But no one forgot what had just happened. They averted their eyes from Marcus, as though their silence itself was a mirror reflecting back the truth. Within Marcus, a new resolve began to form. He knew Sky West Horizons was not just a client of Ellington Systems. They relied on his technology to run every flight, every schedule, every operation. And today, by dismissing him openly in the seat he had purchased, they had placed themselves in peril. Marcus quietly closed the file, his eyes flickering with a different light. No longer endurance, no longer compromise for the sake of peace. This was the beginning of a calculation. The plane pierced through layers of cloud, shuddering gently. Someone lifted a window shade, and light burst into the cabin, flooding the narrow space with brilliance. In that instant, Marcus saw the path before him with clarity. A confrontation that would not end in seat 1A, but stretch into boardrooms, contracts, and the very destiny of an airline. And Sky West Horizons would soon learn that sometimes a small act of disdain can exact the price of an entire empire. The plane touched down in San Diego beneath a blazing red sunset. Passengers rose to their feet, the clatter of luggage from the overhead bins blending with weary sighs. Marcus remained seated, waiting for the crowd to thin. He did not avoid the rush out of timidity, but because he needed a few more seconds to steady himself, to keep the storm inside from breaking loose. Brandon hurried down the aisle without a backward glance. He acted as though the entire ordeal had never happened, but the smug smile he had worn at the start still haunted Marcus. As Linda Foster passed, she paused and gave him a gentle nod, her eyes shining with both sympathy and encouragement. Marcus returned it with a slight nod of his own. Nothing more, yet it felt like a validation. He had not been wrong. Stepping off the plane, he rolled his suitcase behind him, striding through the terminal awash in fluorescent light. With each step, fragments of memory from just hours earlier pressed into his mind. Sophie's forced smile, Philip's threat, "We can have you removed from this flight." Brandon's gaze, arrogant as if the power of the airline existed solely to serve him. Each detail cut deep, like a blade carving scars that refused to fade. Outside, his driver was waiting. The car door opened, releasing the scent of leather mixed with familiar cinnamon oil. The middle-aged man behind the wheel greeted him with a warm smile. "Good flight, Mr. Ellington." Marcus glanced out the window, catching the reflection of city lights dancing on the bay. His reply was quiet. "We're home. That's enough." But inside, nothing felt familiar. At the bayfront villa, Marcus set his suitcase in the corner of the living room and dropped his leather briefcase onto the marble counter. He poured himself a glass of cold water, but as it touched his lips, the faint metallic taste made him grimace. Everything seemed stripped of flavor. What should have been peace after the journey now felt like a heavy void. His phone buzzed. Dozens of emails from the executive team about the Phoenix deal lit up the screen. Good news, news that should have brought satisfaction. But tonight, none of it stirred him. He swiped the notifications aside. Marcus sat in the shadows of the vast kitchen, city lights spilling in through the glass. He remembered all the times in the past he had chosen to let things go, for the sake of harmony, for the sake of reputation, to keep moving forward. But this time was different. Not because of seat 1A. Not because of one arrogant young passenger. But because the entire system, from flight attendants to supervisors, had conspired to make injustice the standard. And that could not be forgotten. He picked up his phone and dialed an internal number. After a few rings, the voice of Ethan Cole, COO of Ellington Systems, came through. "Marcus, I'm still at the office." "Who?" "Everything from Phoenix has been sent to you." "Is something urgent?" Marcus leaned back, his voice low and cold. "I want every contract with SkyWest Horizons on my desk by morning. Terms, deadlines, every detail." Ethan hesitated, puzzled. "What are you planning to do?" Marcus closed his eyes for a brief moment, drew in a deep breath, then answered slowly, each word sharp as iron. "It's time they learned their lesson, not on the plane, but through the very system they depend on." He ended the call, the thud of the phone hitting the table echoing in the empty kitchen. In the darkness, Marcus's eyes gleamed, no longer with raw anger, but with a cold resolve. A plan had been set in motion, silent, deliberate, and powerful enough to shake an entire airline to its core. The next morning, the sun poured over San Diego Bay, casting a golden glow across gleaming glass towers. But for Marcus Ellington, the morning carried no peace. He had risen before the sky had shed its grey, dressed in a charcoal suit that framed his solid build. His footsteps echoed with resolve on the marble floors of Ellington Systems headquarters, the very place he had built from a rented office a decade earlier. Employees bowed their heads as he passed, but Marcus only nodded faintly. His eyes held a coldness that none could read. No one guessed what he had endured the night before. The boardroom doors opened. COO Ethan Cole was already waiting, laptop open, a neat stack of documents in place. At 40-9, Ethan was a man of composure, but the look on Marcus's face made him falter. Something in his eyes seemed told to chill the entire room. "You asked for every contract with SkyWest Horizons," Ethan began evenly. "Here they are, valid until year's end. We control their entire infrastructure: scheduling, maintenance, crew tracking, operational management. To put it bluntly, if our systems stall for even a few hours, they would be thrown into chaos like a ship without a compass. Marcus pulled the stack closer, turning each page as though reading an indictment. His fingers tapped against the table, slow but heavy. "And what else?" he asked, voice low and rough, like wind through stone. Ethan allowed himself the faintest smile, a glint lighting his eyes. "If we begin to reallocate resources, prioritizing their rivals, at least 3 airlines are waiting to sign. They would seize the opportunity immediately." Marcus leaned back, his gaze lifting to the glass ceiling where sunlight poured down like a blade of fire. In his mind, Brandon Hale's face resurfaced. The smug grin, the arrogant stance. Then Philip Warren's forced smile as he threatened him. His hand clenched, then released. Patience. Everything must be calculated. This was no impulsive revenge. This was strategy. "Sky West Horizons," Marcus said slowly, "will be shifted from priority client to the very bottom. No more extra support, no more special service. They will receive only what the contract demands. Nothing more, nothing less." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Do you want us to notify them first?" Marcus shook his head, his eyes flashing. "No. They will only understand the value of a seat when their entire operation begins to falter. Let them discover it themselves. Only then will the lesson be carved deep." The silence that followed was heavy. Then Ethan gave a quiet laugh, shaking his head. "That seat 1A, it might become the most expensive seat in their history." Marcus replied only with a sharp, cold stare. He did not need praise. He needed results. Hours later, the senior team assembled. The digital board lit up, displaying the full client network. Marcus stood tall, like a general before a battlefield map. He pointed and commanded, "Shift resources to Atlantic Air and Pacific Crown. Accelerate integration for them. Sky West will no longer receive priority. Every support request goes to the end of the line." Fingers hammered keyboards, rapid and relentless. The entire room became a war machine ready to strike. When the meeting ended, Marcus remained alone, one hand on the table, eyes fixed on the misted glass window. Below, the city bustled, traffic streaming unaware that a quiet plan was unfolding, one that would decide the fate of an airline. He whispered, voice like a vow. "They thought they could diminish me over a seat. Soon they will learn that disdain was the most expensive mistake of all." Just 3 days after the meeting, the undercurrent Marcus had set in motion began crashing into Sky West Horizons. At a regional office in Denver, scheduling screens flickered wildly. Flights stacked up with delays, maintenance orders froze, crew data lagged behind. A technician slammed his keyboard, sweat beading on his forehead. "I can't access the maintenance logs. The system's running slower than dial up." On the other end of the hotline, Ellington Systems Support replied coolly, "We will process requests in the order they are received. Please be patient." But what no one realized was that the order now placed Sky West firmly at the bottom of the list. In Los Angeles, a pilot frowned at the assignment board. "We're cleared to fly, but we don't even have a full crew. Who is managing this?" A lead flight attendant shook her head, her voice hoarse. The schedule's scrambled. I was just told to swap shifts last minute, but there's no backup staff. Meanwhile, in New York, passengers at the gate erupted in protest as their flight fell over an hour behind. One furious traveler shouted, "I have a major meeting in Chicago. They're calling it a technical issue, but this is the third time this week." Complaint emails, angry tweets, and Facebook posts tagged with #SkyWest delays spread like wildfire. The airline's polished reputation began to crack. Back in San Diego, Marcus sat quietly in his office, staring out at the sea beyond the glass window. The phone rang. Ethan Cole entered, handing it over. "You'll want to take this," the trembling voice of a regional director spilled out. "We were drowning in scheduling backlogs. Our support tickets aren't being resolved. Flights are on the verge of being grounded. Please prioritize us. We're a major partner." Marcus's lips curved into a smile that never reached his eyes. His reply was calm, almost icy. "We have been, and will continue to, fulfill the contract. Nothing more, nothing less." Silence fell on the line, then ragged breathing, an attempt to keep composure. "But this is going to affect thousands of passengers. Don't you understand?" Marcus gripped the armrest of his chair, but his tone remained even. "I understand perfectly, and I also understand this simple truth. Respect is not an optional service. It is a prerequisite." He ended the call. The room sank back into stillness, but outside, an entire airline was collapsing into chaos. In airports across the country, the scenes repeated. Weary passengers sprawled in waiting areas, ground staff shouting into radios, pilots slumped in crew lounges with nothing to do. Each broken link in the chain spiraled into larger disorder. And all of it stemmed from one invisible shift. Ellington Systems had turned its back. Marcus stood before the window, sunlight striking his suit until he looked forged from steel. In his amber eyes, there was no more burning rage, only the cold gleam of a man resolved. "This," he murmured, "is only the beginning." 1 week later, the SkyWest Horizons headquarters in Chicago buzzed like a hive torn open. Phones rang non-stop. Employees rushed down hallways. Newspapers screamed with bold red headlines. SkyWest hit by massive delays. Passengers outraged. Inside a closed boardroom, the company's CEO, Richard Kane, a 55-year-old man with sleek salt and pepper hair, sat slumped behind the long table, his tie loosened, sweat glistening on his temple. In front of him lay a thick report. Dozens of delayed flights, millions in losses, a reputation in freefall. The COO's voice trembled as he spoke. "Sir, the root of the problem lies with Ellington Systems. They are maintaining the system, but their support has slowed to the bare minimum. We are completely paralyzed." Richard slammed his pen down, the sharp crack echoing through the room. "Then call Marcus Ellington, right now." In San Diego, the offices of Ellington Systems remained calm as ever. Marcus sat in his private conference room, a steaming cup of coffee beside him. He had been waiting for this call. The phone rang. Ethan Cole placed it on the table, looked at Marcus, and gave a slight nod. Marcus pressed the button to answer. Richard's voice came heavy, strained but trying to remain polite. "Marcus, this is Richard Kane. We need to talk. The current situation is critical." Marcus turned his chair, eyes fixed on the sunlit waters of San Diego Bay. He took a sip of coffee, then replied evenly, "Listen, Richard. From where I stand, everything remains within contract terms. We have not violated a single clause." Richard swallowed hard, his voice urgent. "But you know full well, this level of support, it's crippling us. Couldn't you adjust the priority?" Marcus's lips curved faintly, half a smile, half ice. "Priority. I recall on last week's flight, your people mentioned that word too. Priority for whom, and by what right?" Silence. Richard paused, then sighed heavily. "All right, I want to meet in person to discuss renewing the contract with improved terms for you. We are willing to pay more." Marcus leaned back, eyes half closed, his voice low but hard as steel. "Richard, this is not about money. It is about respect. Your people dismissed me as if I were an anonymous passenger. And now, you are paying the price." On the other end, the chaos of the Sky West office bled through the line, the ringing phones, employees calling out reports, Richard's own labored breathing. He knew that in this chess match, he was already cornered. "Marcus," Richard said, his voice tight, "what do you want?" Marcus opened his eyes, staring past the glass window at the endless horizon of the sea. His voice resonated, deep and uncompromising. "What I want cannot be resolved in a phone call. It will be decided in the boardroom, in every clause of the new contract. And when that happens, Sky West Horizons will understand. A seat is not just a place to sit. It can be a sentence." He ended the call. The sharp click echoed in the room, cold as a judge's gavel. Ethan looked at his boss, a smirk tugging at his lips. "So they've started to beg." Marcus said nothing. He simply rotated his coffee cup slowly, the glint in his eyes betraying the calm satisfaction of a man who had just shifted the balance of power. 2 weeks passed, and the American aviation industry was in turmoil. CNBC opened its broadcast with a headline crawling across the screen. "Sky West Horizons loses critical tech contract. Rivals seize market share." While Sky West struggled with mounting delays, competitors Atlantic Air and Pacific Crown surged ahead. Ellington Systems' technology was deployed at lightning speed, schedules ran seamlessly, and customer experience soared. The press hailed it as a meteoric leap powered by Ellington technology. In the Ellington Systems boardroom, the glow of a giant screen cast light across Marcus's face. On the digital map, the red patches representing Sky West shrank steadily, while the blue of Atlantic Air spread outward like a tide swallowing the market. Ethan Cole reported, his voice brimming with excitement. "Atlantic is ready to sign a 5-year expansion deal. Pacific Crown has submitted a proposal for full integration. Sky West, they just lost another 12% of the domestic market." Marcus showed no emotion. He merely gave a slight nod, his eyes fixed on the shifting colors on the map. Inside, he heard echoes from the past. Sophie's voice saying, "This seat is needed for a VIP passenger." Philip's cold threat, "We can have you removed from this flight." Each phrase now felt like a blade cutting away at Sky West's throne. In Chicago, Sky West's headquarters resembled a battlefield in collapse. Richard Kane slammed the table. We must win back Ellington. We can't let Atlantic swallow the market." But the CFO shook his head, his tone heavy with despair. Ellington has refused every meeting. He said, "The decisions have already been made. The rivals hold the keys now. SkyWest is down to temporary contracts at best." The words fell over the room like a death sentence. Meanwhile, in San Diego, Marcus stood by a high-rise window, watching the sunset turn the ocean into molten copper. Ethan entered, holding a fresh contract in hand. "They will beg again," Ethan said firmly. "Do you want to send SkyWest a warning, to remind them exactly why they're losing everything?" Marcus lifted a glass of red wine, the glow of the liquid painting his face in crimson. He shook his head gently. "No need. They already know. And when they look back, they will remember. It all began with Seat 1A. He took a slow sip, the dark grape flavor spreading, burning at the back of his throat. In Marcus's eyes, there was no anger left, only the calm of a man who had rewritten the rules of the game. SkyWest Horizons did not realize that the moment they dismissed him as an anonymous passenger was the very moment they triggered the most painful downfall in their history. 3 weeks later, when the media storm had finally quieted, a thick envelope was delivered to the offices of Ellington Systems. The assistant placed it on Marcus's desk with a curious glance. Marcus opened it slowly. Inside was a letter printed on premium paper, the text in elegant italics. The sender, Richard Kane, CEO of SkyWest Horizons. "We sincerely apologize for the incident on your recent flight. It was an unfortunate misunderstanding. We hope for the opportunity to make amends and re-establish our partnership. SkyWest Horizons has always valued Ellington Systems, and you personally, Mr. Ellington." The polished words stretched across the page like a fine ribbon, but to Marcus, they were empty. He folded the letter, set it aside, without a sigh, without a smile. Because he understood. An apology sent only after the damage had erupted is nothing more than a patch on a vessel with a shattered hull. That evening, Marcus dined with an old friend at a seaside restaurant. In the glow of candlelight, his friend asked, "Will you return to SkyWest?" Marcus gently swirled his glass of wine, his eyes on the waves beyond the window. His reply was quiet, steady, resolute. No, they missed the simplest opportunity. 2 words, "I'm sorry," spoken in the moment it mattered. Now it holds no value. His friend fell silent, then nodded as if in understanding. Marcus gazed into the distance, his eyes reflecting the moonlight on the water. Slowly, he continued. "People think disrespect is a small thing, but sometimes that moment decides the future, theirs and mine. They turned a single seat, 1A, into $1 billion verdict, and that cannot be undone." Beyond the glass, the waves kept breaking against the shore, a relentless reminder. Marcus knew life does not always grant second chances, and respect, whether in an airplane cabin or a boardroom, will always be worth more than any contract. In a world where power is often measured in contracts and numbers, the story of Marcus Ellington reminds us of a simple truth. Respect is never a privilege. It is a birthright for every human being. A cold remark, a condescending glance, an unjust decision. Moments that may seem small, yet it is precisely those moments that can ignite consequences that cannot be undone. For SkyWest Horizons, the cost of disrespect was not just a single first-class seat. It was market share, reputation, and an uncertain future. For Marcus, it was the moment that defined dignity, and he turned silent endurance into the strength to change the entire board. But what about you? Have you ever been underestimated, dismissed simply because of your appearance or a temporary position? Remember this. Your value does not lie in how others treat you, but in how you stand firm in the face of injustice. If you believe respect must always come first, hit like to spread this message. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next dramatic stories, where justice, dignity, and change are always brought to light. And finally, leave a comment with just 2 words: respect first, so the whole world can see that, no matter where we are, respect must always fly higher than everything else.